Good day, everyone. Today, we're going to present about economic impact of COVID-19, a Malaysian context. This is part of a video presentation for Introduction to Malaysian Economy. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Dinesh Gunalan, and my fellow group mates will be Sarvis Warren Anandan and also Nishan Mitran Ganesan. So today, we're going to talk about COVID-19. The main pandemic COVID-19 has grown into health, socio-economic, and humanitarian crisis of unprecedented magnitude and effect. So, Malaysian situation is exacerbated by the fact that only at the beginning of March 2020 did the government come into power and already face a severe debt crisis. So, on the economic front, the lockdown is turning into an economic knockout. The economy is nosediving with identifying negative impacts on jobs, incomes, and other true livelihoods, disrupting supply chains and upending businesses, and also exaggerating inequalities, poverty, and hardship, especially among the most vulnerable COVID. So, several economic stimulus initiatives has been taken by the government such as certain packages called Prihatin Rakyat Caring for People, which packages on 27th March 2020. However, the critical challenge is how the different measures will be delivered to reach those most in need and whether they will provide the expected relief in the intermediate term, stimulate the economy. While several economic stimulus initiatives to preserve the welfare of Rakyat. In this context, um, the report pulls together data and information to serve as baseline and diagnostic of identifying those workers and enterprises most at risk and need so that their specific characterization and vulnerabilities can be taken into account. With this, we can talk more about the projection as of 23rd March 2020. GDP growth of Malaysia in 2020 will descend from 4% to 2.9%, with up to 2.4 million job losses, of which 67% will be from the inexpert workers category. An external source anticipate the real GDP growth and unemployment in Malaysia to worsen in both baseline and scenario forecasts. As of the best case scenario and worst case scenario, certain point can be elaborated. For example, real GDP contracted by 2.61 relative to baseline. That's in the base case scenario. When we talk about worst case scenario, real GDP contracted by 6.9% relative to baseline. Same goes to the amount of job losses, which is for the best case scenario, we can say about 951,000 out of 16 million employed laborers being dozen of jobs. In the worst case scenario, 2.4 million people might lose their job. Next, in terms of overview of economic forecast from Bank Negara Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia says that output losses as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. The implementation of the Movement Control Order (MCO) can enhance the economic forecast as well as commodity supply disruption both in terms of domestically and also internationally. Next, in terms of unemployment rate in Malaysia, we can say that it's rising from 3.5% in 2020 if the global pandemic continues to worsen. Can be further elaborated. The updated baseline forecast show that the unemployment rate will rise to 3.4% in 2020 compared to 3.5% in 2020 in the pandemic worsens. Likewise, with real GDP, the unemployment rate is expected to return to normal levels for the baseline forecast of 3.2%, whereas the scenario forecast expect the unemployment rate to return to normal level within 2023, which is about 3.3%. Thank you.
Okay, next, I'm going to talk about the impacts of COVID-19 and the policy interventions. The impacts are the potential socio-economic impacts of COVID-19. There are direct sectoral impact to industries, drop in foreign trade, fall in stock markets, reduced consumer spending, cash flow issues, and further reduce domestic demand. The degree of impact in specific sector. In the tourism sector, the closure of tourism facilities, the closure of all hotels and accommodation, and travel restrictions. In the aviation and logistics sector, the fall in fuel prices, fall in travel demand, and the supply chain processes affected. In oil and gas sector, fall in demand for oil and gas, decline in oil price arising from short-term demand impact. In agriculture sector, businesses slows down in China and Europe, production legally unaffected. The policy interventions, there are three strategies under the policy interventions. The first strategy are mitigating impact of COVID-19. Under the mitigating impact of COVID-19, each cash flow of business assist affected individuals, stimulate demand for the domestic travel and tourism sector. The second strategy is catalyzing riot-centric economic growth, boost household spending and people-centric project. Strategy 3, promoting equality investment. Leverage public investments, provide incentives to encourage private investment. Policy interventions aims to inject an additional total of RM 250 billion into the economy to stimulate the Malaysian economy with three primary goals such as to protect the rakyat, to support the business, and to strengthen the economy. The government announced on 6th April 2020 an additional allocation of RM 10 billion to support businesses and SMEs. The RM 10 billion will be allocated as follows: RM 7.9 billion to the enhanced wage subsidy program, RM 13.8 billion to help 4.8 million workers, and originally allocated RM 5.9 billion to help 3.3 million workers. RM 2.1 billion to fund pre-hatching special grant. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nishant, and my part is I'm going to present about the selected measures of the economic stimulus package. Well, this package is introduced by the government firstly on 27 February. Well, this economic package, first it will be focused on the finance part, which is financing the facilities, where it will be done to facilitate the restructuring and the rescheduling of loans. And about 2 billion was allocated to establish a special relief facility, which is known as SRF, to assist the cash flows of affected small medium enterprises. And next, Bank Simpanan Nasional was to offer 200 million in micro-credit facilities to the tourism and the other affected sectors during the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, about 500 million are to be invested by the Securities Commission Investment Fund in early stage and also in growth stage Malaysian companies. And the next is the enhanced industry boosters, where in terms of industry boosters, they are mainly focused on the deferment of monthly tax installments for 6 months on the tourism sector. And an exemption of service tax on taxable service was given for 6 months for hospitality industry. And all the affected sectors from COVID-19 were exempted from the Human Resource Development Fund. And most importantly, 15% of discount were given on electric bills for all affected sectors. Next, around 500 million was allocated to stimulate demand for the tourism sector. Last but not least, up to 5 million were given per affected small medium enterprises for guarantees to finance working capital. All right. Next, the economic stimulus package is focused on the socio-economic drivers. Okay, firstly, a fund amounting to 1.1 billion were allocated to assist the retrenched workers under the employment insurance system. Next, a minimum employee contribution was given to the Employees Provident Fund, which is known as EPF, and also it is reduced from 11% to 7%, which is to potentially increase the disposable income by approximately 10 billion. Thirdly, amount of 300 million was allocated for all SMEs, which is known as small medium enterprises, in order to upgrade, modernize, and also to rejuvenate the productive assets under the SME automation and digitalization facility, which is known as ADF. Lastly, up 2 billion worth of small scale projects to be carried out in order to boost the socio-economic drivers. Next, let's talk about the selected measures of the Prihatin economic stimulus package. Okay, let's go into what are the sectors which are focused by under the Prihatin economic stimulus package, where 128 billion were given to the rakyat-centric, under rakyat-centric, where 110 billion given for business support, and around 2 billion was given to strengthen the economy. Well, you can see all these points are allocated according to each sectors. For example, under Racket Center, you can say that most important thing where the allocation of 10 billion for one-off cash to assist all the B40 and M40 households, where under business support was mainly is to support the small medium enterprises in terms of income tax installments, where under economic strengtheners, mostly it was giving importance to all the G1 and the G4 contractors, and also a 2 billion worth of projects were implemented in order to enhance the economic structure of Malaysia. Well, finally, what can you conclude is that the constructive action of effective measures to overcome this epidemic became the main agenda of the Malaysian government. Well, you can see that the COVID-19 pandemic clearly affected all the sectors, especially the economy, from the smallest individual income to the largest international trade. Well, most importantly, the Malaysian government provided all the support and substantial estimates from various sectors to reduce the impact of the pandemic, and also and all the Malaysians, all the public have given their part, also played their part through different channels to assist the country in facing this great epidemic. That's all from us. Thank you. Let's move on to the Q&A session.
All right. As of the first question that could probably frequently asked by many people, what is the impact of stimulus package provided by the government to the essential sectors in terms of economic growth? And the answer will be,
And I think this part, I think I can answer the question, where what are the impact of stimulus package given provided by the government in terms of the essential sectors that are focused by the government in terms of economic growth? Well, we can say what are the impacts is that it has increased the GDP, most importantly, the GDP of the economy from 0.2% to 0.5%, which is the most important. And most importantly, it has given a lifeline to all the sectors to restabilize the economy of Malaysia and to bring it back to a normal situation where mainly the small medium enterprises can benefit from this. I think that's the answer for this question. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, for the next questions, what are the best case scenario of the real GDP growth and unemployment in Malaysia as of 23rd March 2020?
okay, for these questions, I think as of the projection of 23rd March 2020, the best case scenario can be further explained under certain points. First, the real GDP contracted by 2.61% relatively to baseline. Second, projected real GDP growth is 1.57%. The next will be value of real GDP losses relative to projected 2020 baseline is equal to 38 billion ringgit. And the amount of job losses, as I said earlier, is 951,000 out of 16 million employed labor in 2019. We can further classified under unskilled labor and skilled labor. For unskilled labor is 647,000. For skilled labor will be 303,000. As of the household income losses, it is said that 41 billion ringgit, which is equal to 5.2%, has been projected baseline in 2020. And last will be the private consumption. Consumption fell by 4.9% due to the income losses. These are all the best case scenarios that have been pointed out by certain forecast departments. That's all.
Okay, let's move on to the last
Thank you,
question
Didi.
of the group. And what are the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on consumer preferences in Malaysia?
There are few effects we can list it down. First and foremost is the drop in foreign trade as supply chains are affected by government order. Then fall in stock markets due to the reduced investor and consumer confidence. Reduced consumer spending due to the implementation of MCO by the government. Cash flow issues arising from the MCO leading to permanent or temporary layoff. And further reduced domestic demand and spending arising from unemployment. I think that are the few list of effects caused by COVID-19 pandemic for the consumers.
Right, thank you. That's all our presentation.